Dr. Inisha. I have joined New over here. Okay. So this today's the class is about abdominal hysterectomy, right? So you have been taught about abdominal hysterectomy previously. অনেক দিন আগে মানে like recently হয়নি. And grossly you have any idea about abdominal? So okay, this will be a revision class, right? So first of all, we start with what are the indications of abdominal hysterectomy, right? So anyone can you enumerate what are the indications of abdominal hysterectomy? So indications of abdominal hysterectomy can be divided into two parts, the benign causes and the malignant causes. But benign causes and non-benign causes. So what are the benign causes first? So when we are talking about prolapse as the indication of hysterectomy, then what route do you prefer? Whether it will be abdominal route or whether it will be vaginal route? It will be vaginal route. So today we are discussing abdominal hysterectomy. So what are the benign causes of abdominal hysterectomy? Fibroid. Okay. One is fibroid uterus. Second, severe endometriosis. Third, okay, endometrial hyperplasia. Again, ovarian tumors comes under the malignant causes. So, okay, one by one. First cause we have found out fibroid. Now, which type of fibroids do you think that hysterectomy would be required? Okay, submucosal fibroids are what? Submucosal fibroids are within the endometrial cavity, the tumor is protruding out. So, easily we can take the fibroid out. So, that is subserosal and intramural fibroids mainly require hysterectomy. Then again, will you do hysterectomy for a patient who has come with the fibroid at the age of 30 or at the age of 40 years? No, I guess. Then which all are the patients whom you think that they require abdominal hysterectomy? Family complete, exactly. So we are talking about indications, right? For indication, we have the benign causes, we have the malignant causes. For benign causes, we got what? We got fibroid. Now, fibroid is when the lady is more than 40 to 50 years of age, as well as family is complete. She no longer desires any other fertility preserving operation. She does not require any other babies or she does not require any other family. Another thing is, suppose if family is completed, she says no. But she has been taking medicine since more than 1 year. She has been taking, there is a heavy menstrual bleeding and she is telling you ki I have taken medications, I have regularly taken all the medications but nothing is working out for me. Every month I am bleeding very heavily, her hemoglobin is falling but nothing can be done. So what we say is failed medical management is also a indication for hysterectomy. Second is, how many myomas will you take? Suppose there are multiple myomas. After taking out myomas, nothing is left in the uterus. So what will you do? You have to go for hysterectomy, right? So one is family complete. If family is not complete, check for whether the medical management has failed or not. If the medical management has not failed, she is taking medication. Now she is asking you ki, okay, no, there is a lower abdominal heaviness. There is every time I feel something, there is a mass in my lower abdomen. And how to elicit this lower abdominal pressure symptoms? Lower abdominal heaviness. Another thing is, if you do USG, you find that her ureters are getting compressed. That uterus has become so much huge that it has started compressing the bilateral ureter. So, the urine output has decreased and there is hydronephrosis. Then you know ki okay fine, she is having pressure symptoms. So, for fibroid, if the patient comes to you, first of all, you ask her whether what all her complaints are. Whether she is asking, okay, no, whatever my signs and symptoms are, I am having heavy menstrual bleeding, but I want to preserve my fertility. Then you put her on medical management. You put her on medical management and wait for 1 year. You prescribe her OCPs. You ask her, okay, fine, you can take LNG IUS, that is Mirena, and wait for 1 year. and see what her response is. Suppose within 1 year she comes to you repeatedly every 2 to 3 months that my symptoms are not decreasing. I am not responding to anything. I want a definitive management. She says this word, I want a definitive management. I cannot bear with this pain and this thing. I want to get a definitive. Then we counsel her for hysterectomy. Another thing is that she is having pressure symptoms. That the urea creatinine is increasing, she is having hydronephrosis, urine output is increasing, then we can go for another indication is hysterectomy. Another cause you said is endometriosis. In all the cases except for the thing that family is complete, when she is coming up to you at the age of 50 years and the family is complete, we go for total abdominal hysterectomy along with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy. Rest of the cases when they are in their reproductive years and yet they required hysterectomy, we do what is only hysterectomy. We preserve the bilateral ovaries. We remove the uterus as well as bilateral salpinx, that is bilateral fallopian tubes we remove, but we do not remove the ovaries. So, if the family is complete, we say TH plus BSO. And for this group of people, what we do is only TH plus salpingectomy. Now you might say, why salpingectomy? We could have done only TH. We could have easily done only TH. Why we are removing the fallopian tubes as well? We are removing these fallopian tubes because it, after removal, it decreases the chances of ovarian CA and endometrial CA. So obviously TH has been done, though, as well as peritoneal CA as well as breast CA. It acts as a protective factor for breast CA, ovarian CA as well as peritoneal carcinoma. The second indication was endometriosis. For endometriosis also, we do the same thing. We remove the uterus as well as bilateral salpinx. And in case of whether the endometriosis is severe, that is grade 4 endometriosis, even if she is in the reproductive years, we remove bilateral ovaries because ovaries as the main source of estrogen, and if we keep the ovaries, it will start secreting estrogen and endometriosis will keep flaring up. So, we cannot help keeping the ovaries, we go for TH plus BSO. So, next indication was, two indications of benign causes we get. Another thing was endometrial hyperplasia. Now, in case of endometrial hyperplasia, if the patient is coming up with this thing that I am having heavy menstrual bleeding, you do one, you order one investigation USG and check whether her endometrial thickness is thick. Now you see whether it is atypical endometrial hyperplasia or typical endometrial hyperplasia. If the patient is having atypical endometrial hyperplasia, there is chances that she will have, if the patient is having endometrial hyperplasia which is atypical variety, we have to explain the patient, okay, see, we have a chances of 15 to 20% chance that you will develop endometrial carcinoma. That's why we counsel her to undergo TH plus BSO. But if the patient is having no atypical features, it is only simple endometrial hyperplasia, for that matter, we can give her Mirena, we can give her LNG IUS for 6 months and check whether it is regressing or not. If it regresses within 1 year, fine. We keep on counseling her and ask her to come every 6 monthly. But if we see it is not regressing and again the same criteria she fulfills, that is failed medical management in 1 year, again in case of simple endometrial hyperplasia also we go for TH plus BSO. So, if the patient is having endometrial hyperplasia, simple endometrial hyperplasia, 1 year of failed medical management, we go for TH BSO. If she comes up with you endometrial hyperplasia with atypical features, then you directly go for TH plus BSO. Then next cause, these are the obstetrical causes. So for obstetrical causes, we go for total and abdominal hysterectomy only. We do not remove the ovaries. It is only to preserve our fertility and it is a life-saving procedure in case of placenta previa or placenta accreta. We say this is placenta accreta sprectum, pars sprectum. If the patient falls under pars sprectum, we go for total abdominal hysterectomy. Another obstetrical causes of abdominal hysterectomy is peripartum hysterectomy, PPH. That is peripartum. That hysterectomy is called as peripartum hysterectomy. To control the heavy bleeding in case of postpartum hemorrhage, the last life-saving procedure is done as peripartum hysterectomy. In that case, we go for subtotal hysterectomy. Why subtotal hysterectomy? What we do in total hysterectomy, we remove the uterus, bilateral fallopian tubes as well as the cervix. But in case of subtotal hysterectomy, what we do? Cervix we do not remove. So in case of emergency, what we have to do? You have to do fast. We have to remove the uterus fast, na? So that's why what we do is we just clamp the isthmus and remove the uterus, but we do not remove the cervix. So in case of peripartum hysterectomy, only the uterus and the bilateral fallopian tubes are removed. That is known as peripartum subtotal hysterectomy. So as to we hasten the procedure and save the life of the patient. Now come to the malignant causes. Total abdominal hysterectomy, uterus, fallopian tube and the cervix. And subtotal hysterectomy, uterus and the bilateral fallopian tube. Cervix is preserved. Okay. So next, what are the malignant causes? First of all, first malignant cause is endometrial CA, where we remove the uterus, bilateral fallopian tube and ovaries. Then second malignant cause is ovarian CA. In case of ovarian CA, what we do is PH plus PSO again. Another is cervical carcinoma. In case of cervical carcinoma, what we do is simple hysterectomy or radical hysterectomy. What we do? Radical hysterectomy. In radical hysterectomy, what are the structures are removed? Uterus, cervix, bilateral fallopian tube, ovary. And extra what are removed? Lymph nodes and cardinal ligament and broad ligaments have to be clamped in any hysterectomy. Exactly. 2 to 3 centimeters. What extra step we do is we will talk about types of hysterectomy when we learn about the steps. So in case of cervical carcinoma, what we'll do is cervical carcinoma, that is radical hysterectomy. So these are the indications. Now coming to the, what are the instruments we have studied instruments. So what are the if the patient now you have known ki these are the indications, the patient is satisfying the criteria of hysterectomy. Now you want to take the patient for hysterectomy. So what are the investigations will you order? Basic. First of all, go for the blood investigations. What are the CBC? Complete hemogram. Be careful when you are telling complete hemogram. Complete hemograms include many things. So simply say hemoglobin and peripheral blood smear. Utter those words which you know everything in and out the topic, right? So you see the hemoglobin of the patient as well as see the peripheral blood smear. Why do you see the peripheral blood smears? Even if she is anemic, you have to know what is the type of anemia. That's why you are seeing the peripheral blood smear. And you want to see the total count of the patient, whether there is any infection or not. These are the three. Another to rule out any renal compromise. So what will you see in kidney function test? Urea and creatinine. And you will see what? Liver function test. Whether the bilirubin is raised or not, whether AST, ALT is raised or not. Fine. Sixth investigation will be serology. What all comes under serology is HIV 1 and 2, HBs, AG, anti-HCV. These three investigations you see. Another thing is coagulation profile. What are PT, INR, bleeding time, APTT, PT, APTT, INR, BTCT. Done. And most important is you see the blood group of the patient as well, because you have to order blood, na. If she requires blood, so you have to see the blood hemoglobin of the patient as well as ABRH typing. Now radiological investigation, USG you have already done. In case of any doubt whether if the USG is not definitive or there is any doubt, okay fine, this structure is not suitable, then you go for CECT abdomen. And then also if it is not clear, then we go for MRI. In case if the patient is having renal compromise or what we said is pressure symptoms are there and bilateral hydronephrosis is there, then you cannot order CECT because you cannot give contrast to the patient, then we go for MRI. And another thing is first line investigation MRI is done when the patient is having multiple fibroids and we don't know where the fibroids are exactly located. So what we do is we say this is known as myoma mapping. We do MRI to do the myoma mapping. Where are the fibroids exactly located? They give you the exact location of the fibroids. MRI gives a clear picture. So that's why if there are multiple fibroids, suppose there is a huge cervical fibroids and we don't know through and through where it is extending. So then instead of going for USG directly, we go for MRI directly and see where the fibroids are located. So these are the radiological investigation. We do ECG in all 12 leads and chest X-ray PA view. All the radiological investigation is done. Then you admit the patient 1 day prior. And what pre-op preparations you need to check? And what pre-op you think that patient should be prepared before the OT? Bladder catheterization we do after the spinal anesthesia has been given. After the general anesthesia or spinal anesthesia has been given. Okay, so we have to keep the patient NPM for at least 4 to 6 hours. Now newer guidelines say, okay, if according to the ERAS protocols, we can allow the patient to have clear liquid. What are the clear liquid? ORS or plain water for up to 2 hours before the OT. But 2 hours at least she should be nil per mouth. So most of the time we admit the patient the previous date. Suppose today the patient is admitted, we tell the patient, okay, you have the dinner by 9 and then you don't have anything, no food after 9. Then we give her hydration. How will you give the hydration? By IV fluids. We give IV ringer lactate mostly. If the patient is diabetic, we give NS or RS, whatever is available. Then pre-operative optimization of the comorbidities. We have to check whether she is having any hypertensive or any diabetic condition anything is there or not. If she is taking any hypothyroid medication, then she should not omit the dose. She has to take her morning dose of L-troxin or Thyronorm, whatever she is taking in the morning itself. Any antihypertensive medication should not be stopped. That has to be given in the morning itself. If the patient is diabetic and she is taking insulin, then her regular dose of insulin can be given up to the previous day night, but the morning dose of insulin should be kept on hold. That should not be given because the patient will be NPM, and again now you will give the insulin, then there will be hypoglycemia. So that's why we do not give her insulin the morning when the OT is scheduled. So on the day of the OT, antihypertensives are given, hypothyroid medications are given, but insulin hypoglycemic or oral hypoglycemics are not given. And CBG is to be checked every 4 hourly. Now the patient is asked to take a scrubbing bath on the day of the OT itself, so that there is no infection going on. And once the patient is on the OT table after the anesthesia has been given, then the catheterization is done for evacuation of the bladder. Otherwise it is not done. And most of the surgical patients, the shaving is given, but nowadays it is said that you do not shave the patient. Max to max what you can do is on table clipping of the pubic hair. That is, we can trim the pubic hair, but no shaving of the pubic hair is not done. That is absolutely not required. Now antiseptic dressing, and the patient lies on the table in a supine position. Antiseptic dressing and draping is being done, and with chlorhexidine or with betadine solution the antiseptic dressing draping is done. Then incision, mostly if it is done for the benign causes, then or the uterus is up to 12 week size, we do give a lower transverse incision. What is this lower transverse incision? This is the symphysis pubis, this is the umbilicus, this is the xiphi. So, and this is the anterior superior iliac spine on the both sides. So we give a lower transverse incision like this, 2 to 3 centimeter above the pubic symphysis. Okay. And now suppose this OT is being done for a malignant condition, like wise you said ki it is a ovarian carcinoma or a endometrial carcinoma. In that case, we give a midline incision like this. Why midline incision? Because in this case, we need to take samples from the bilateral paracolic gutter. We have to check all the abdominal viscera, whether there is any deposits or not. We have to check other organs as well, whether the cancer has spread to other organs or not, and we have to take the sample from those organs as well. That's why we give a midline incision. That is known as staging laparotomy and proceed to THBSO. That is why all the malignant condition where we are going abdominal hysterectomy, we write in the OT note that staging laparotomy plus proceed to THBSO. In case of staging laparotomy, what we do, we give a midline incision, we enter the peritoneum immediately. If there is ascites, 10 to 20 ml of the ascitic fluid is taken and set for biopsy. If there is no ascites, then we put 10 to 200 ml of NS into the abdominal cavity, and then we wash all the peritoneal structure, and then we take that wash sample of 20 to 20 ml syringe and send for biopsy, so that if there is any malignancy that has spread to other organs, it will come in the peritoneal washings itself. Then we palpate every abdominal organs in a clockwise manner, so as to from the liver to the spleen to the stomach to the transverse colon, like this we go in a clockwise direction and palpate every organ, so that we can get any tumor deposit or anything of that sort. If we get any tumor deposit, the staging of the ovarian carcinoma changes, and accordingly we have to proceed for the OT. That's why we give a midline incision. But now when we are doing only hysterectomy for a fibroid, we know it's a benign concision, we don't need to give a midline incision, we give a transverse incision, lower transverse incision, 2 to 3 centimeter above the pubic symphysis. Now the abdomen is opened, the rectus sheath is cut and split, and now we enter the peritoneum. Once we are inside the peritoneum, what we do, we take out the uterus first and cut and put. See, after we have entered the peritoneum, see, we can take, this is the uterus, this is the bilateral fallopian tubes, and here the ovaries are there attached to the lateral pelvic wall with the IP ligament. These are the IP ligament, this is the IP ligament, and this is the lateral pelvic wall, and this is the fallopian tube. So once we have seen this is the uterus, what we do is, we take two curved clamp. This is one curved clamp, this is one curved clamp. We take three structures inside this curved clamp. One is the IP ligament, one is the round ligament, one is the fallopian tubes. The easiest way to remember the steps is R, T, O. The first step is, you put the clamp in such a way that all these three structures are inside the clamp. You open the clamp and all these three structures, these tubes, this IP ligament, and there is the round ligament. All these three structures are inside the one clamp. So that now you pull the two clamps, the entire structure will be outside the abdominal cavity. Infundibulopelvic ligament. And what are the contents of the IP ligament? Now anyone will tell me. Infundibulopelvic ligament. Infundibulopelvic ligament contains what structures? Ovarian vessels and nerves. So that is why. And what are the another significant thing which passes beneath this IP ligament? That is ureter, right? That's why the ureter, what we say is, if this is the ovary and this is the ovarian fossa, the ureter lies just like this. This is the ovary, this is the ureter, and this is the ovarian fossa. Just beneath the ovary, the posterior surface of the ovarian fossa, the ureter passes. That's why we have to be very cautious while we are clamping the IP ligament. We should not go very lateral to the lateral pelvic wall. Keep, what we say is, to be safe is, keep your clamps as close to the ovaries and as close to the specimen as possible. Do not go to the lateral pelvic wall. As you move towards the lateral pelvic wall, what structure you will be clamping? You will be clamping the ureter. So, first of all, after opening the abdomen, once the uterus and the ovaries and the tubes are visible, we put two bilateral curved clamp to include all these three structures: round ligament, bilateral fallopian tubes, and the infundibulopelvic ligaments. All the three structures are clamped and they are taken out of the uterus. Now first clamp is put on the round ligament. Suppose this is the round ligament. So what we do is, we put one artery forceps over here, another artery forceps over here, and now we cut this in between. And this structure is cut, clamped, and transfixed and held long. This is the entire sentence you have to say. The round ligament is cut, clamped, transfixed and held long. Cut, clamped and held long. Transfixed and held long. So first step is, all the cornuous structures are clamped and held out so that the specimen is outside the abdominal cavity. Second step is, the bilateral round ligaments are cut, clamped and transfixed and held long. Second structure is, the third structure which is clamped is the infundibulopelvic ligament. The same way the infundibulopelvic ligaments on the both sides are cut, clamped, transfixed. Only transfixed, not held long. Ovarian, infundibulopelvic ligament, that is ovarian ligaments, that's why we say, to remember we say ki ovarian ligaments. Now once the cornual structures, that is the tubes, the round ligaments and the infundibulopelvic ligaments are cut, clamped and transfixed. Now what we do is the bladder dissection. Why these are tubes. Now why I said the round ligament has to be held long. Why? Because once we are keeping the sutures long, we can pull them like this. We are pulling it. What happens once we are pulling it? Both side round ligaments, we are pulling it like this. So the bladder will be prominently visible. It will fan out like this. Once we are pulling it, the bladder fold will be prominently visible. That will be the uterovesical fold will be prominently visible, and once the uterovesical fold is prominently visible, we sharply dissect down the bladder over the cervix. Once the bladder is dissected down over the cervix, how do you know that bladder has been dissected down? We find a glistening white structure. Once the bladder is dissected down, we find a glistening white structure, that is the cervix. So once that structure is visible, we know the bladder is down. Now we look for the uterine arteries. The uterine artery will be visible over here. Once this bladder has gone down, the bilateral uterine artery will be visible. So that next step is skeletonization of the uterine artery. What do we mean by skeletonization? Any fossa or any other peritoneal structure which is attached to the uterine artery is dissected down along with the bladder, so that while clamping the uterine artery, we do not injure the ureter. Because once we are dissecting the bladder down, the ureter are also going downwards. So there is no chances that we can clamp the ureters. That's why we say this is the most important step in a abdominal hysterectomy. That is to dissect the bladder down properly, as well as to skeletonize the uterine artery, because exactly beneath the 0.5 to 2.5 centimeter beneath that only the ureter lies. If you don't skeletonize the uterine artery properly, you might injure the ureter as well. After the uterine artery is visible on both the side, what we do is we take to coccus clamp. People will ask you what is the instrument used over here. We use coccus clamp over here. Two coccus clamps are put over the uterine artery. Suppose this is the uterine artery coming over here and bilateral uterine arteries are clamping. So how do you put the clamps? Till now, how we were putting the clamps? Like this, horizontally. All the structures were horizontal. But now we will be putting the clamps parallel to the floor. Parallel to the floor, parallel to the roof. That is horizontally like this. Two coccus clamps are put horizontally over the uterine artery. How do you put the coccus clamp? By sleeping over the uterine isthmus. We will palpate and see what is the most constricted region of the uterus. The isthmus is the junction between the uterus and the cervix. So we palpate and see, okay, fine, this is the constricted part. Here the uterine artery rise. We can easily see because we have skeletonized the uterine artery. Now we put the coccus clamp over the isthmus by sleeping it and then clamp the bilateral uterine artery. We put two horizontal coccus clamp over here and over here, and one artery here and here to prevent the backflow. Now we cut the uterine artery in between. Here the uterine arteries are cut, so that there is no bleeding and there is no chances of ureteric injury. Only two things we have to remember, that is how the coccus are placed. Coccus are always placed horizontally. Never make this mistake. Whenever you are holding the coccus or the examiner is asking you how to put the coccus, say parallel to the roof, parallel to the floor, horizontal over the uterine isthmus. This is the exact quote unquote line you utter in the exam. And what instrument? That is coccus is used. Never straight artery, never curved artery. This coccus is used. So two coccus are used for one uterine artery and one curved artery used to prevent the backflow from the specimen. These are the exact sentences examiner wants to hear, and you have to utter these exact sentences. So now once the bilateral uterine artery has been clamped, cut and ligated, never utter the word transfix. For uterine artery, what we do is ligate, never transfix. All the ligaments are transfixed and all the artery or the blood vessels are cut, clamped and ligated. Using what are the suture materials we are using is 2,0-Vicryl. So once the uterine artery has been cut, clamped and suture ligated, then what we do is we go for transfixation and cutting of the cardinal ligaments. What are the cardinal ligaments? What are the cardinal ligaments? McEnroe's, uterosacral and the pubosacral. What we see, uterosacral and the McEnroe's ligament. They form a cartwheel-like structure to support the uterus, right? Now next clamp is, now the examiner will ask you one question. How will you put the clamp? Whether after clamping the uterine artery, suppose this is the coccus, you have, this is the coccus, it is attached. Now uterine artery has been clamped. So how will you put the next clamp? Whether you will put it medially, whether you will put it laterally. Till now all the clamps were put laterally, that's why. The examiner will confuse you over here, whether you will go for lateral placement of the clamp or medial placement of the clamp. After the uterine artery has been cut, clamped and ligated, next whatever clamp you put, all the clamps are medial to the uterine artery stump. This is a thumb rule. Uterine artery is always clamped using coccus horizontally, and next all the clamps are put medial to the uterine artery clamp. Whatever clamp you put, all are medial and close to the specimen. Now, only one clamp which is in this entire operation is put horizontal is uterine artery. Rest all the clamps are vertical clamps. Only one clamp. That is why the examiner asks you this question, how will you clamp the uterine artery? When you are holding the coccus, always hold the coccus in a horizontal like this. In front of the examiner also hold the clamp like this. Do not hold the clamp like this, because if you are holding the clamp like, you are making a mistake. Never ever hold the clamp in a vertical position. Only coccus is the only instrument used for uterine artery clamping, and it is always put parallel to the floor, parallel to the roof, that is horizontally. And next all the clamps will be medial to the uterine artery stump. And all the other structures will be next uterine artery, this uterosacral and McEnroe's are cut, clamped and transfixed. Once they are cut, clamped and transfixed, now the vault is visible. Now the specimen will be visible. You can easily see the cervix, and you cut the, using a fine dissecting forceps, you cut the entire specimen and take the specimen out. Now once the specimen is taken out, you check the specimen for whether entire cervix has been cut or not, because if the cervix is not cut, that is subtotal hysterectomy, right? So that's why you have to check whether you have taken out the entire cervix or not. Once the entire cervix is taken out and the vault is open, you hold the angles of the vault using Allis forceps. What we say is Allis tissue holding forceps. The angles of the vault are held using Allis tissue holding forceps, and the vault is closed using Vicryl 20 in a continuous interlocking manner. These are the exact words to be asked by the examiner. How will you close the vault? Using 20 Vicryl continuous interlocking manner. And after the vault is closed, what we do is we tie the suture of the uterosacral and McEnroe's with that of the angle of the vault, so that in future there is no vault prolapse. So never forget this step. You have to, after you have closed the vault, always tie the suture of the vault along with the uterosacral and the McEnroe's ligament together, so that there is no chance of vault prolapse. Now after the vault has been closed, your OT has been down, what we do is we check hemostasis is secured and checked. How do we check the hemostasis? We check from all the stuff. So first what we had tied is round ligament, then what we have tied is tubo-ovarian ligament. So we check according to that. This side, from the right side, suppose the surgeon is checking, so from the right side round ligament, this tubo-ovarian ligament, then we check the uterine artery stump, then angle of the vault, then go to the left side, angle of the vault, again uterine artery stump, tubo-ovarian ligament, round ligament in a clockwise manner, we check the entire stumps. Sometimes we might give a normal saline to wash all the structures and see whether there is any bleeding or not. After everything has been checked and resecured, then we take what is known as mop count. Number of mops we have taken, all the instruments counts are taken, everything should match, and then we close the abdomen. So what we write is the abdomen has been closed after checking the hemostasis and after mop and instrument count is being given. Then rectus sheath is closed and the skin is closed. This is the entire step of hysterectomy. So what are the important steps? Someone please summarize what are the important steps. It depends. You can use monofilament for skin closure in a mattress manner we can give, or we can do subcutaneous closure, what is popularly known among the patient parties as pasting. That is subcuticular closure. Exactly. The suture is not visible. We pass the suture in between the dermis and the epidermis. We pass the suture like that so that none of the sutures is visible over the skin. After that, vaginal toileting is done using betadine, as well as checked whether there is any bleeding from the vault or not. If we are doing vaginal hysterectomy, then we do packing for sure. But in case of abdominal hysterectomy, we do not need to do packing. কোথায় বাটকেছে বল? Rectus sheath has been closed. যা যা কেটেছিলিস তাই, whatever you have structures you have to cut, we have to resecure them. The first step what we did, the skin was opened using a lower transverse incision. The rectus sheath was cut and split laterally. So now you have to close the rectus sheath as well. You have cut and split it, na? So now you have to close the rectus sheath as well. Now the skin is closed. Now vaginal toileting is done, the OT is done. The post-operative period, what main things you will do? You will give sedation to the patient as well as post-operative pain management. We can give paracetamol, we can give tramadol, and if there is severe pain, we can give pethidine as well. So someone summarize what are the most important steps in hysterectomy. What are the key points where you can, the examiner can ask you the questions. Using coccus, never straight, never curved. Straight clamps are used for round ligament, tubo-ovarian ligament, holding the cornual structures. Coccus are used for holding, clamping the uterine artery, and curved clamps are used for holding the cornual structure as well as backflow. Another is for when you are suturing the vault. There the curved clamps are used. So now we know what are the instruments we use in hysterectomy. What are the instruments we use? Curved clamps we use, straight clamp we use, artery forceps we use, Ellis tissue holding forceps we use, coccus we use. And what are the complications of hysterectomy? Now when we are asking you what are the complications of hysterectomy, you have to say intraoperative complications and post-operative complications. So what are the intraoperative complications? We can injure the ureter. When we can injure the ureter? In the infundibulopelvic ligament while clamping the uterine arteries. Bladder injury. How will you injure the bladder? While dissecting down the bladders, as well as while clamping the uterine artery as well. If you don't dissect down the bladder, you will be directly putting the clamp on the bladder as well. So that's why we have to dissect down the bladder. Another is rare but it happens, that is bowel injury. Suppose you are doing this hysterectomy for grade 4 endometriosis. In case of grade 4 endometriosis, what happens? The bladder, bowel, everything is adhered to each other. So while dissecting down everything, while doing adhesiolysis, what we can do is we can injure the bowel as well. So bladder injury, bowel injury, as well as ureteric injury, as well as there can be infection, blood loss. What are the post-operative complications? Immediate complications. There can be hemorrhage, there can be vault hematoma. On post-op day 2, day 3, if we find there is still bloody discharges coming out per vagina, then there is chances that there has been vault hematoma. Or there might be stump bleeding as well. All the stumps we have checked, but there is some bleeding has been left out, that means stump hematoma. Suppose on post-op day 2 or day 3, the patient is coming with a small mass on the lateral abdominal wall, and she is saying she is having fever, she is having on and off pain. What might be the cause? Intra-abdominal abscess, and most common and most dreadful complication is urinoma formation, that you have injured the ureter, you don't know that you have injured the bladder, you have already transected the ureter, the urine is leaking in the abdomen, now it has collected because what we say, omentum is the policeman of the abdomen. Now the urine has leaked, the omentum has come up and formed into a small mass-like structure, and there is a urinoma formation over there. There can be vault infection, there can be sepsis, anything. And long-term complication, what happens is, once we are doing this definitive management for especially those patients who are in the reproductive age group and they have undergone THBS, so only for this failed medical management or these pressure symptoms, then what happens, they have undergone what? Surgical menopause. The body is not prepared for such a deficiency of hormonal states, right? So now these people need hormonal supplementation. They start having hot flashes, they develop bone mineral density deficiency symptoms, they have weaker bones, they are more prone to fall, they are more prone for mood swings, they are more prone for Alzheimer's. So that's why we have to check them and give them adequate hormonal supplementation, that is estrogen and progesterone supplementation, as well as calcium and vitamin D3 supplementation as well. So what we study is indications, steps, what all the instruments are being used, and what are the post-operative complications, intraoperative complication, what are the pre-operative precautions you have to take. Any other thing you want to know? Oh, regarding the specimen. Once you are talking about this specimen is shown and the examiner asks you, tell me what is this specimen. So what we have to say is, this is a wet mount specimen of the uterus. If bilateral fallopian tubes are visible, then tubes, and the cervix. And probably this hysterectomy has been done due to some malignant causes, since a mass is already protruding out. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Do not say for this cause. Even if you know, even if I have told you ki this was choriocarcinoma, this was some endometrial carcinoma, ovarian carcinoma, then also don't utter the word that this is this. This was due to ovarian carcinoma. Do not say like this. Say this is a wet mount specimen showing the uterus, cervix, bilateral fallopian tube and the ovary, and a mass protruding out of the uterine body. Probably it might be a case of endometrial carcinoma or choriocarcinoma. Probably. You don't know the diagnosis since you do not have the biopsy report. So never for sure you say that this is this specimen only. This is the way you say this. Probably this is due to some malignant causes, we do not know. That is why you say this, probably this is due to uterine cancer, or probably this is due to choriocarcinoma, we do not know what it is. Probably this is endometrial carcinoma, these things are protruding out as well. Anyone has any questions, or you want to ask anything? Anybody has any doubts or want to ask anything about abdominal hysterectomy steps?